Hey everybody, welcome back to Futures. Mike Fairborn sitting in for Ben Watson today. It's great to have you here, folks. We had a recent rally, as you might know, in the markets, in the futures specifically, and a recent pullback to a smaller pullback. I'm curious if we're going to see a rally towards the end of the year as well. So we'll see how that holds up and some interesting things setting up on an intraday chart. I'd like to welcome all of you here with us today. We do have Connie Hill helping us out in the chat. Great to have Connie on board, as well as each of you folks. So a lot to look at today. Let's go ahead and jump into some disclosures to get the show on the road here. Wanted to start off first with some disclosures on futures. Futures and futures options trading involves substantial risk. It's not suitable for all investors. Now, some additional points listed there for futures, as you can see right there. In addition, virtual currency derivatives trading involves unique and significant risks. Be mindful of those risks as well. You should be careful when considering trading in virtual currency derivatives. You should carefully consider whether trading in virtual currency derivatives is appropriate for you in light of your experience, objectives, financial resources, and other relevant circumstances. Information presented here is for general information purposes only. The paper money software application that we'll be looking at today is for educational purposes only as well. Okay, Schwab does not recommend the sole use of technical analysis for investment research. And a final look at some disclosures here. All right. Lastly, just wanted to state that stop orders are not guaranteed in execution due to exchange-based rules on certain conditions at the time of activation. The exchange may reject or substitute an exchange-designated limit order for the originally triggered market order. On that, let's go ahead and pull up our desktop and take a look and see what we've got in terms of the Thinkorswim platform right here. Now, this was the recent rally I was referring to, folks, right over here. In terms of the ES, you can see we did break a downward sloping trend line. In fact, let's pull that up right now. I'm going to show this to you guys on a 30-minute basis real quick, just to kind of highlight what we're looking at here. It does give us a better perspective, and I tend to use over here this time frame where I've got three charts kind of linked together. Very helpful for futures. I do use it for stocks as well. But a daily, a 30-minute, and a 5-minute, an easy click back and forth to pull those up. What I want to do is show you first right here. Let's just do this. If I come down and just use the Thinkorswim drawing tools right up top, drawing off of the top of these highs right here, pull this guy down, what do we see? Well, we did take out that trend line, that sloping trend line to the downside here. That can be an indication of a change in trend. We have other indications here of a 30-minute chart. So there could be some interesting potential trades setting up here. Again, a 30-minute chart we're looking at here. Took it down from the daily to get more sort of resolution as to what's going on here. But you can see on that trend line, kind of coming through here, holding again. Folks, if we step back and just look at this sort of potential price pattern here, we have a strong upward move, broke the trend line, and some consolidation right there. So sitting on that level, that does look a lot like what I talk about actually on my Tuesday class, a swing trade. It looks a lot like, a bull flag type pattern. This could set us up for the month of December ahead here. We'll see. But so far, it's been a strong bounce, a strong recovery here. And I wanted to highlight this for you as we kind of take a closer look at it. Now, on each of these futures, because we might be looking at a trade here today, particularly if we can break out, and you can maybe see that flag pattern here on the daily chart. There's the break. It's kind of nice with Thinkorswim because those lines will stay on the daily chart. I think it's drawn maybe a little bit more correctly on a 30-minute, but that could be the potential bounce right there. Let's take a look at some of the others over here. Before I do that, though, I'm going to add in the volume profile because the volume profile could be really helpful, particularly on these shorter-term intraday moves. A lot of times, if you breach the volume profile point of control, sometimes prices can move a little bit easier above that level. It can be easier if you don't have a lot of trading activity. Let's explain that real quick. it is quite useful anytime you've got volume. We don't have that on the indices, but we do have it on the E-mini, well, the futures contracts, as they do have volume. You got to have volume in order to see it. So let's dive into this right now. I want to get started early with the volume profile. It is on the charts itself, so it's not a script. You can add that in right here, over here to the right. If I click on the wheel, this will show us the majority of where the volume has been. And I'll point that out here in just a second. Oftentimes what I'll do is I'll flip this around to maybe 30 as opposed to 70. That's really the only change. So where the greatest amount of volume has come in at. Let's go ahead and click OK right here. OK again. I'm going to back this out so you can see where that volume comes in at. Now, this is a daily chart, and you can see there was a lot of volume through here. This hazed out area, that's where that top 30% of volume has come in at. Now, we're clearly above it, but you'll notice one thing. If I draw some lines through here, even using a daily chart, you notice an acceleration of the trend once we got past this level. It might just be easier for prices to move up if you don't have a lot of volume here, particularly if you're taking out maybe a resistance high and the trend really ran up. Now, this is a longer term chart on futures. A lot of times traders will just simply use the intraday chart. And I wanted to tie that into today with our discussion as we take a look at this. Let's look at the other major market indices as well, futures contracts here. And I'll show you where we're at. Down below, I just want to show you where we're at. Actually, on the NASDAQ as well, kind of a similar chart pattern, maybe a trend line break coming right through here, as you can see. So maybe setting up possibly for a year-end type of rally. We'll see on that. The YM as well, and the RTY. Ooh, a lot of lines on the RTY. Let me take some of these off. We had some Fibonacci lines drawn on there, but you can see right there as well, we actually have one of these major spikes in that volume profile right there. Now, the volume profile just simply takes the volume down below and says, okay, what price did this volume come in at? And then that's what you're seeing, this as being over here. These lines and these setups, these nodes is what they refer to them as. Really just kind of peaks and valleys of volume coming in here. But that's what ultimately it's telling us. And you'll find support or resistance at these levels. And if you can get past them, you can find an area where you might see strength. Because you don't have a lot of resistance, a lot of trading at these particular levels once you get above it. Right here is a case in point on the RTY, which can lead the markets. You see it right there. Look at that volume just trail off. We haven't been up to these areas. And a lot of times if you can get above a key volume level, which we're kind of finding support at right there, there was a major spike, you might find support and then a rally up beyond this point. So it can be helpful. It's such a useful tool, and folks, you would never know otherwise if you didn't have this tool to look at, right, on the charts. Let's go back to the ES right now. I'm going to show you what this looks like on a shorter term chart so you can see this. So if I'm going to go ahead and just put the volume profile on here, because ultimately we want to look at it on a shorter term basis and see what we've got on the ES here. All right, so this is just the volume over the past 30 days. Where might we find resistance at, and where might we find it easier for prices to start moving? Well, we're right in one of those areas right now. In fact, I'll just draw some lines in here, right through here. You can see, and as you get above that level, you might experience a breakout to getting up to this point. Okay, so here's sort of our flag pattern that we were looking at. And we've got another let me draw a different line. I'm going to try to draw this just as best as I can. Another sort of a trend line right there. And we're right on the verge of breaking out of that as well. Okay, so let's do this. Let's go ahead and show you that particular setup. And you can see right where it's almost like a mini flag setting up within this flag. And I'm just waiting to see of the first 30 minutes if we can break above that level on the daily chart. Notice we've got a little bit of resistance right here as well. Can we break these higher points? A key point to note here is, do you take the trade right now, or do you sort of wait for prices to get right above that resistance? Because folks, that is resistance right there. That is resistance. We don't have to wait a ton further, a lot more, bigger price move and not much more to see if we can get above that level. And then what could be in store is not just a shorter term move up to here, right? But we might have that longer term flag pattern setting up on an intraday basis. And you see it right here. Okay. So there's a lot going on. It happens really quick on futures. So I wanted to throw it out to you, get us kind of looking at a few different things before the day begins here. But let's just make sure we're all on the same page. Welcome to all you guys here as well. Yep, volume profile, good for support resistance. It is. And then also addition to that, once you break above it, there's less resistance potentially, is the way traders will look at it, to get to the next sort of volume spike, which is right here. Okay, so getting above that spike, let me just draw the line there. You can see that it may continue to break out there, and that could kind of set up for the longer term sort of this move right there, this flag pattern that we were looking at. We'd see this on a daily chart, but we're just holding that all too well. I mean, we're really holding this range after making such a big spike. This is also known as, well, how do the traders will say, it's the Santa Claus rally, the year-end rally. It could be interesting. So we'll see. But a very interesting time to kind of look at futures right here, perhaps, because you are getting, what a lot of traders will look at in terms of price patterns, etc. But this is tying in the volume profile, can be an interesting tool to look at as we go through it. Now, I'm going to set this alert up so that if we do begin to break out, we'll have this in place right here. I'm going to go ahead and just put a right click on here. And what I'm going to do is, let's just do single alert, just so we're notified of it. I'll just add or above. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to raise this guy up just a little bit to this level. Okay, I'm going to give it a little bit of range, because why not? That's been resistance. It's been resistance through here. So we'll see what does, unfold right there. Okay, so we've got a little bit of an indication there. I wanted to highlight as well. Let's go ahead and dive in. By the way, you can always go to a 5-minute chart and see it even better. You can see we did a pretty good job putting our alert right at the top of that point there. All right. So that is one potential trade setup that we've got here. Why would this area be of such interest? Well, take out the volume profile here for a second. Let's go ahead and just look at the seasonality this time of year as well. It's particularly going into December. Under my style chart mode, folks, go under seasonality. Gives us a general sense of what price action has done towards the end of the year. November wasn't so much in line. In fact, we can make these more comparable. Maybe just go to chart settings up top. You see me clicking right there, a little wheel. If I go over into price axis, I can put everything as a percent, which makes this data that was 5 years ago, some of it more relevant to where we're at right now. And you can really see what can tend to happen towards the end of the year. You get this general sort of drift to the upside. Now, that's on average what happens. We don't know if that's going to be the case. Some traders will look at this and they'll say, well, what you've got over here is a strong, and this is generally the strongest time of the year on average, 5-year, 10-year, 20-year. That is November tends to be the strongest month of the year. We dipped in November, didn't we? So sometimes markets can correct and bounce back towards the end, and maybe even bounce up a little higher towards the end of the year. We'll see if that unfolds, but that intraday chart pattern kind of helps us see that a little bit better, because we did get this big move. And if we saw a rally towards the end of the year, folks, it would fit actually pretty well with seasonality and sort of the Santa Claus rally, year-end rally, if that happens. So we'll see on that. I will say that a lot of the retailers, which kind of helps the year-end rally, the retailers had been doing better, and they had some good earnings. Some of them did. So we'll see if that makes a difference as well. But there we are. We're sitting on it, and we'll see if we get that. But clearly your trend line break right there. Okay. Well, that was a quick dive in. I wanted to make sure we would get that if it was going to be. I was watching it this morning and I was thinking maybe it could start to break. It could be a sort of a flag pattern to get on a paper trade on. So we'll see. We can still do that, and we have basically this during our discussion here to put that trade on, or if you were looking to put a paper trade on and test this out towards the end of the day, that could just be an entry point for you. Okay, let's do this now. Got our alerts in, so we can hit that if it does unfold. But coming over here, let's look at the gold as well. So gold had a pretty good rally, obviously, lately. Silver has really taken off even above gold. Let me reset this back to, I'll take those percentages off here. There we go. That was just for the volume profile. We've got a little bit of a zigzag, sort of a pattern coming in here on gold, as you can see right there. So these zigzags, a lot of times they are similar in length right here, as you can see. And we might just be finding a form of natural resistance. The last time we hit the top of that zigzag, folks, we pulled back a little bit. We don't know if we'll get that. But yeah, there could also be a resumption of the longer term trend. Here was silver, as I was mentioning to you. Silver really taking off above gold. It's been lagging gold for quite some time, but there you go. Looking at this on an intraday basis is what this looks like here. What's fascinating too is these longer term trends that will run up, and they're very, very sharp on a lot of these futures contracts. Short-term basis, coming back to this daily 30 and 5-minute chart, what can be helpful is just saying, gosh, he had a big run. We kind of came up to resistance. What are we seeing here? Well, you might be seeing a shoulder, head, and possible shoulder pattern right there. Excuse me. We don't know for sure if that's what we're seeing, but we could be seeing that. And this can be a helpful indication, particularly, folks, on something that can be there can be a lot of weight, in the futures. A move up, a move down can mean a lot. So understanding technicals, we know it's important on stocks, very important on, obviously futures contracts as well. There's a lot of potentially at stake here, and recognizing it and utilizing these shorter term timeframes to maybe see what's developing from a larger term scale, it can be quite helpful. So anyways, let's continue over here. Here is our copper. Copper did break above a high here, and you can see there was a little bit of a sideways consolidation here with copper. Now, what might be that projection on copper? It was interesting if we even just put like a little triangle pattern right here, you can see that we did take out the tops here, right there, with copper, and there could be an extension. Some might have said, hey, this could have been a head and shoulders pattern, but I don't know. That's kind of a move. The thing is, copper, I'm always worried about it, is that right there. Gosh, it was a big decline. It's a massive move on copper, and that had to do with the tariff situation. I don't know. Will it happen again? We don't know for sure. Obviously, things can change pretty quickly, but that's sort of one of the potential risks out there. We've kind of climbed the wall of worry, so to speak, all the way back here. And if we were just looking at this, it actually looks really quite strong. But be mindful that, yeah, there can be that potential political aspect too that could change the dynamic on that pretty quick. A couple other notes here. Here is crude light. So crude light coming down, down, down. I don't know if you noticed, but some of the Dow Jones Industrial Transports have been breaking out. That's not uncommon. There are places, actually, I don't know where it's at in your neck of the woods, and I was looking outside the U.S., inside the greater U.S., price of a gallon of gasoline is under $2 now in many places. So my neck of the woods is about 2.5. Certain places you can get it, but yeah, it's interesting that we've continued to see it decline here, and we'll see what goes on there. But the transports and even some of the companies out there, like for example, Delta Airlines, you can see that a huge cost input here is the price of fuel. Jet fuel and labor costs generally are the big costs with airlines. But as one example here, just as a side note, you can utilize commodities or futures in this case to help us with stocks that are heavily reliant on that commodity for a particular, like I said, a price input or whatever the case might be. Fuel in this case. There you go right there. By the way, a quick note, we can look at gas right here, RB, yeah, RBOB, and that is the price of gasoline futures, and it is down below $2 right here. Of course, other inputs, expenses like taxes that states will charge will bring it above that level, but there is gasoline, excuse me, on sale below $2 a gallon in the U.S., and there you can see right there. Okay, interesting. So that I have a play on oil right there. Quick look at wheat. So as we talked about wheat a couple of weeks ago, as I was in this class for Ben as well, you know, the interesting thing with some of these commodities, they've begun to take out prior highs off the bottom. They've been down for a while and then just kind of resting in this range. Now, what does wheat move when we look at wheat up top? If we go to the right over here with any futures contract, this is one that you just might not have looked at. But and I don't look at it too commonly either, but over here, just click on futures and you can see what a tick size moves. So there is 25 cents. So 4 of those in $1, right? Just like the ES really moves. And for each one of those ticks, it's $12.50. Probably pretty familiar with the ES. Similar, I should say, right? Similar to the ES. It's 25 cents is the tick mark, 0.25. And each of those tick values is $12.50. But if you look at this, I mean, we can just kind of, so what are we looking at? $50, right, per dollar, to just get a general sense of what this looks like. And playing something like this on a daily chart, I mean, let's just, for example, just explore what this would do if we had like a full follow through, like a something like this, sort of a flag pattern over here that bounced up. If we were to take a move like this, pull back here, and we had this kind of a range come up here, I'm just kind of eyeballing it, and just generally speaking, let's just say, in fact, let's just measure this range right here. So about 5, so about 50 points. What was each point? $50. So on a per contract basis, what kind of a move would we be looking at here? You know, I mean, it's a pretty big move, right? And that's how we can take that 0.25 times 4 for each dollar, $50. For each dollar move here, up or down. That's up or down. We're just looking at the upside here. Of course, yeah, it works on the downside as well, right? And so you've kind of got that double-edged sword that you'll find with those futures contracts. But look at the move there, $50 over how many points? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If something like that, it could be a big move. Of course, it could be a big move to the downside. That's why a lot of traders, they will look at that shorter term time frame to kind of set up those intraday moves, and they'll play it, not really holding on to it for a longer period of time, but maybe the shorter term moves. By the way, if you get down to the shorter term time frame, it's not too liquid, especially overnight, right? But if it were to break out, that's one way traders will look at futures contracts on a shorter term basis. So quick look at corn. Corn did break higher here, and soybeans really the big explosive move. Over three and a half years, I think China's agreed to 87 million metric tons, MMTs. And so we'll see what happens there. Quick note, in my swing trade class, one of the companies, global companies that uses a lot of soybeans, and you can see over here, just using the soybean chart, transferring that over into stocks, a company that's heavily involved with soybeans, Bunge Global. See the move? Very, very similar. Kind of, what are you saying here? A little bit of a flag pattern here as well. So this is one of the swing trade stocks that we've got in that swing trade class that we're just kind of tracking right now, paper money trade, but using commodities in this case, you know, to do it. to take a look at it. Lastly, as we go through our list though, there is our Bitcoin. And let's just go ahead and just cancel that. I'm going to continue. That's okay. The Bitcoin for now coming on down. Some of these analysts are really saying that they expect a big move in December. But some of them are very optimistic. Right now, though, you kind of look at the chart and you say, well, it's really quite low. If those analysts were right, and it does have a big move up here, like a Bitcoin type move, and there are other ETFs as well out there that track Bitcoin. But if it were to take place, folks, would it not also have to take out these shorter term lows first? It would. And so if I just go to a 30-minute chart, what is it going to have to do first? It's going to have to take out these highs initially. So over here, you're going to have to take out some highs to kind of get going. And that's what traders might be looking at first, right? If an analyst is bullish, and there's a lot being said about Bitcoin right now, and I don't know if that's what's getting it started right here, but let's just say, for example, this comes up here, begins to flag off early. We can kind of take advantage of maybe what insights they've got, but we're narrowing this down to a shorter term chart where we can actually maybe start to see indications of that daily chart start to actually unfold. So again, that comes back to multiple time frames. I think it's a key point just because you are getting so much movement that can happen here with these futures contracts. And by the way, a little bit of longer term sort of, you see this on a 30-minute chart better, but a shoulder, head, really kind of a weak shoulder over here. But if this were to break out, which is doing, it already did, it could just be the starting point of a move. So hopefully I've shed some light on that for you. It's really tricky when you're getting so much movement one way or the other in terms of what that means for dollars, etc. Let's just look at Bitcoin real quick. At $5, so every tick is a $5. Notice over here they're priced in $5 moves, and each tick is $25. So yeah, I don't think we have like a, no, we do not have. Sometimes you can just check for the mini, which oftentimes is a tenth of the value. This doesn't have it. You just put an M in front of the symbol up top, kind of like over here. We could put an M in front of our ES and see what we get right there. And that's going to be a tenth of the size. So we know the ES is 1250. Look down here with me. Same tick size. It's $1.25. Okay. Okay. And still quite a bit of liquidity. Let me go ahead and just clear this guy off right here. Yeah. Okay. So there we go. So that was a lot going into it. Now let's go in and take a look now, since we're back at this, and let's look at our shorter term chart on the ES. This is really kind of tying into, like I said, our potential year-end rally setup here on futures, and can we trade those little moves? I'm going to go over here and highlight the pivot points. Let's take a look at the pivots real quick and see what we've got. Is there anything here we can take a look at? All right, so using pivot points, I talked about pivot points a couple weeks ago. This is our main pivot point line right there. I've got some calculations, and I put those in my X handle. Be sure and follow Connie and I on X, Connie Hill CS, Mike Fairborn CS, if you like, that kind of financial content. In fact, I'll pull it up here and just highlight it here for you guys real quick. But there you go. So the pivot point, we've got the pivot point, we've got the R1 level, and we have the R2 level up top. Now, if we can get a break above that R1, a lot of traders will say, yeah, this is where I trade to the R2. Okay, notice where our signal is right there, our alert. It's actually above that point. What I'm going to do right now is just pull this down, because this might represent a stronger intraday resistance level right there. I just dragged it and pulled it down a little bit. If we can break those two, now we're tying in multiple indications here with indicators for the possibility of a breakout move. And then traders, like I said, might take it up to here. So if they were to add a contract in here, they might take it off up top at this level here. That's very, very short term, but it's an approach, to take the trade. All right. Okay. Let me highlight this here. Let's see. Yeah, right here. Oh, so I did post the economic calendar on here. This is really helpful too, especially for the first half hour, which we did just hit. Wanted to highlight this. We didn't have too much coming out today, and that can be all else equal when you don't have a lot of economic data right here. Can be a positive, particularly if you're getting a lot of movement and some that are occurring later as well. You get later type moves or later announcements that can move the market. So this is interesting as well. But real quick, I'm just going to have to scroll down a little bit faster to show you guys the pivot, and I'll just there it is. So what I'll do is I'll right click. I'll just post this if you guys want to take a look at those pivot point calculations. Let me quickly show you too, in case you hadn't seen it. Okay, that will get you the pivot points right there, where you can take a look at the formulas. It's all based on yesterday's calculations, yesterday's values, and that's where we're getting these lines. So I talked about that previously, but I didn't want to leave it out because it could be an interesting way to trade this, potential move coming up here. Yeah, so let's see. I'll just highlight this real quick. Okay, that's the swing trading class, but we talked about pivot points over here. And futures in more detail. I didn't want to leave you guys if you didn't get the full discussion on that. Let me just futures. Yeah, I'll find it. It's down here. And it is right over there. Oh, I was like, okay, so yeah, it was just last week's discussion right here, breaking down the pivot points where we broke it down in specific details, and that's just last week's discussion if you want to take a look at that for futures. Okay, so you could just find that under our Trader Talks and playlists right there. I'll go ahead and post this link in as well. Be sure to subscribe to our channel. Folks, if you're getting value out of this presentation as well, smash that like button. There is a survey in the chat as well. Thank you, Connie, for reposting that. Just a quick survey there. Lets us know how we're doing in this class. I think there's just really two questions in there, and there's some comments in there, particularly topic requests as well. Do the lines change automatically every day? They do change every day. In fact, I'm going to pull them up right now. Let's highlight that so I can show you. I'll at least show you where you can add these in. They do change every day based upon those pivot point calculations. The link I posted there for you off of the X handle. Coming up top though, you can just add them in simply by going into Edit Studies. Folks, you can see my pivots right there. They're just an indicator. And it's just the pivot points, not the person pivots, but pivot points. Double click on those, add those in, and you've got it. Okay. So we're coming up to our point here. It'd be great if in the next, I don't know, 5-10 minutes or so, we could get an entry point in here, a signal. Let me show you how I could set that up though on the ES to do it. I want to show you guys, let me just do this real quick. On the MES, we can set up a trade. And again, if we wanted to use something that's a tenth of the tick or the value up or down, we could use this as well. But what I did to place the trade, in case that were to move, again, we just switched to the micro E-mini. So it's not $12.50 a tick, it's $1.25 a tick. Looking for a break. If it does come above here, we could go to the active trader over here to the right and click on it and click on the little arrow right there, the little drop down. Okay, and what that's going to do is enable us to maybe increase the number of contracts. Now, what did I do just now? I put it to 3. So what is that? 3 contracts. You say, my gosh, Mike, that's a lot of contracts. Well, we are using the micro here. So we're not using the main, I should just say the core or whatever, E-mini contract, the ES. And the ES was $12.50 a tick, or $50 a contract. If I'm using 3 of these and they are $1.25, even I have more contracts over here, and always be mindful, that more contracts are more commission as well. But I'm just going to state, we'll just make this really obvious, right? Just throw it down here into a calculator. 375. 375 happens to be, or 1250 is greater than 375. So even with more contracts, we're using an approach here that is just less up or down. Ooh, we're getting closer and closer to that level. So we'll see what happens. By the way, it can also act as resistance. So you're really waiting for maybe a 2-tick break above that level. Let me show you what that would look like here if we were going to put on a trade. All right, so let's do this. I'm going to go down here and I'll show you how we would set something like this up. If it were to break above here 2 ticks with a target, sometimes traders will use a 50% range over here. A lot of times they'll just go for the full target as well. So I'll just go for the full target today. I'll show you what that looks like. So where is our pivot point line? Notice if I point to it right here, you can see it up top. It's at the 68.93. No, I'm sorry, that's the one up top. 68.60. So 2 ticks above there is going to put us close to about 68.60.50. 68.60.50. If I can get that over here so we can see it a little bit better. There we go. We're looking over here on the buy end. So let's go up to it. It's above where we're at right now. There it is right there. Okay. I could click on this, but it's just going to buy. So what I want to do instead is go to my template, set up a bracket order. So we have our potential exit down below in the form of the stop that we discussed. And we have our target up top as well. Remember, this is meant to be a trade on the day. We're pulling back right now, but just I wanted to highlight this so you guys can see it. Okay, so I'm going to, generally what I'll do is I'll set this target up top, which is up here. I'll set it up a little bit higher. And so I could say something like, just to get it under my belt, I could just say a 20. We can adjust it here in a minute. For our potential stop, we do use an ATR down below. Now, there's the ATR. So the ATR right there, the average true range, looks at the movement, and it just sort of is a volatility sort of adjusted stop. We basically multiply this by 2. So twice the normal range. Does that make sense for an exit? Yeah, it could make a lot of sense if you go 2 times in the other direction. So keep that in mind. All right, so that'd be about real close to 11. So let's go ahead and just set this at 11. Again, we're using the mini. So always be mindful of what your risk is as you set something like this up. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and click on that 68.60.50 right here. And what it's doing is it's putting in a, let's see, buy stop. Yeah. Oh, see, you got to keep adjusting it. I've got to get more space down here is what I need. There we go. Across here. Let's just do it this way. Cool. All right. Very good. But you can see how this is setting up for us here at a particular price. So what we could do is technically click on that and get the trade set up in place. Now it says hold control to issue a limit order. Does everybody see that? It's a buy stop order, so it's got to get above that point. Sorry, it keeps moving. 68.60.50 right there. Okay. This is what this is going to look like right here. And we'll see if we can break up above it. But remember, this is 2 ticks above this line, so it's going to have to break out and extend beyond that level. But you can see over here in our dialog box, we're looking at, you can see that scenario, that setup here. And I'm going to go ahead and just send that through. So you can see what that looks like. Oh, supposed to do our buy stop at that level. Okay, well, it triggered anyways. It got us in a little bit early. That's fine. I can just adjust this and show you guys. I'm going to pull this up to our top up here. So 2 ticks generally below the R1 level is where the exit point could be. And you'll notice down here, it set this up at 11 points lower. So always be mindful what that looks like when we set these in, okay? When we put this in place. We're looking at, so it was 375 a tick, right? And always be mindful of risk and potential reward and potential risk, right? As it's setting up, because talked about the stop order is not a guarantee of a fill. Okay, so that's the scenario, that's the setup that we put in place there. Yeah, it should have given me the trade right above there and just set it in place. So we would just wait for it to hit it. But anyways, it was a buy stop. Don't know what happened on that execution, but at least we got it under our belt. We could see it, folks. And again, what is this trade? This is simply just a trade based upon this unfolding intraday, that intraday move going higher. Seeing it on a 5-minute chart, it's a little tricky. Let's go back out to our regular chart, and you can see that here. So that's our line, very closely set up to it. But if it were to break above that level, it didn't. But if it did, maybe a trader might take at least a trade up to the next point. But it could mean a longer term breakout as well. Okay, so that's what's going on right there. Yeah, like F would mean 20 ticks. Oh, yeah, we're looking at that level. So what I was looking at there is, the tick itself. We were looking at those moves themselves. If you come over here and take a look. So when I put it up at 20, let's go back to our futures. I want to answer that, and then we should be all set, ready to go. But back to our pivot points, looking at the ATR down here, if that's what you're looking at, see ya? Down here. So these are actual, the range of the bar. So these aren't ticks. This is the actual range itself. And these are listed as in actual dollar moves. In fact, if you look at the bar right there, the one we're on right now, if you look at R while we're here, is an 8. And that's one reason why these are getting bigger and we're moving up. And so we just did initially the tick calculation, but that's why it's really important to know exactly what you're getting on the ES specifically futures. Yeah, each tick is $12.50. So every time it goes up or down, is $12.50 by that tick amount. The micro future reduced that substantially. It cut it basically, it's a tenth of that amount. And this is just an area where a lot of traders might begin. It's, we're just using paper money here, but that's an area that could be looked at right there. So it's just $1.25. Some might even just start off with one contract here, to get kind of familiar with it. All right. So folks, that's what we had today. Quite a few things going on, but we did set up, we looked at the longer term ES chart. And on a shorter term basis, we narrowed it down to a 30-minute, and then we finally took it down to a 5-minute pivot point potential trade. Talk through that, more on that next week as well. If you do like these swing trade type moves, I do teach that swing trade class. That's later today. We look at stocks specifically like that BG, and we trade the bigger move on those as well, like the daily chart. But there was a survey in the chat. Again, folks, if you liked today's presentation, you found it helpful, smash that like button. It was good to be with you all today. And on that, yeah, you can trade another way. You can trade it a lot of different ways. We're just using an approach, the pivot points, to trade what some traders would consider higher probability trading points between a breakout range and a potential target range. Within that, we use the longer term daily chart with the possible seasonal move to the end of the year and a little bit of a flag pattern on a shorter term basis. So a few things tied up there, but that's what we did. All right, everybody, have a great rest of the day. A lot of great classes throughout the rest of the day. Hope you stay tuned into it. Thanks so much, Connie, for your help, and good to see you all. See you next time.